Welcome to the episode 19 of the Office Hours podcast. Today we have with us Mo, and I'm very interested in what kind of topics we're going to discuss today. Before we start, make sure to check out our Telegram channel, maybe sign up there, and also click the subscribe button on YouTube because that would just help us in spreading the message quite a bit. And without further ado, Mo, let's take it away. How you been for the last couple of weeks?
I'm good. I've been busy. I've had a lot of things to attend to, especially now that it's towards the end of the year. You want to use the last few minutes to finish up all the things you planned for the year. But it's going well and getting results. And you?
Pretty good. I'm back home, as you could see. I guess before you probably would have seen the
Yeah.
green screen, but I've been a little bit busy, so I haven't had a chance to set it up. But maybe for the next one, we'll get a chance to set it up properly. Yeah. So I'm back home. I'm trying to take it easy, have a little bit of break. It's been a little bit getting kind of crazy. A little bit of cabin fever, and just I started noticing that I wasn't being nearly as productive after nearly 2 months of working pretty much nonstop the entire time. So, sadly, I'm not 20 years old anymore, and that such pace is a little bit more difficult to maintain, you know.
Yeah.
And I'm not the one to self-medicalize because apparently there are ways, but I don't tend to do that. So yeah, working
Yeah.
working 14-hour days is difficult, and I've decided to take a little break, maybe relax a little bit, get ready for the holidays and that, and you know, get the energy back, and then kind of dive into it again, reinvigorate it a little bit more.
Yeah. Honestly, I find taking random breaks, or maybe not random, like planned breaks during projects kind of helps with the refocusing and productivity. But anyway, maybe I'm not one to give advice, probably know about this.
Hmm.
But about the self-medicalization, I saw some things recently on I don't know where I was seeing that. Joe Rogan was
Mm.
talking about using some pills. I don't know if did you see that?
I haven't seen that one in particular. To be honest, ever since he moved to Spotify, it's a very kind of random here and there because I don't open the Spotify app often enough to kind of keep on pace. But whenever I see some clips, he still posts clips on YouTube, like little shorts. And if I find it to be particularly interesting, then I maybe sometimes try and go to Spotify and listen to the whole thing. But
Mm,
it was definitely more accessible for me where he was on YouTube.
yeah.
But I guess there's like this big thing and has been for a while about like the nootropics, like the uh, I guess not necessarily medical stuff, but more of a what's the word? Supplements to kind of help your brain function in a sense. I guess they could work, but some people get so in depth. I'm like, I ain't got time for that. So I haven't tried anything like that myself.
Well, I'm not a doctor. I mean, clearly, but in my experience of it, I tried some of these products before. It was supposed to help you with your focus, but the result I got wasn't exactly um, what was advertised because
Hmm.
I realized that for a while I had to deal with like some random anxiety at some point. But maybe because I wasn't also resting enough during this period.
Hmm.
But I don't know if it's a good idea. Anyway, maybe it works for some people or not. I just saw Joe Rogan really like pushing this product recently,
Hmm.
and I was wondering like, is it there even any form of medical backing to this or like scientific thing
Uh,
about this? Anyway, it is what it is.
I guess
If
it,
it
it's
works,
it's
it
still
works.
qualified as like a supplement, so they don't have to be as stringent and or FDA approved, I guess. But It's kind of funny. A bunch of years back, I was back home, and my mom and I we went windsurfing, and we're both kind of newbies at that point in time, and there was a pretty strong gust of wind, and she got knocked on the head by the mast because
Hmm.
the sail, the wind hit the sail, and then the mast kind of flicked really fast, and she got a nasty bump on her head. And so, after doing like the X-rays, MRIs, whatever, they said this is like a mild concussion, and then they prescribed her some of the medication that improves brain tissue oxygenation. And I think it was around the time when like the Olympics was happening, and some athletes got disqualified for taking the same medication for improvement of oxygenation. It's like, well, good job, mom. You're doping, you're doping with
I
the drugs
mean,
that are like WADA prohibited. So that's kind of
you
funny.
never know. You never know
Yeah,
these
yeah.
things.
But I mean, it is like an over-the-counter drug to treat hypoxia, I guess, or some other symptoms with poor oxygenation. But hey, for Olympic purposes, it's qualified to be doping. So you never know.
Yeah, we stay careful. But it kind of like creates like a nice segue into what I
Mm.
wanted to talk about today with you. So I was curious. Earlier in the week, I saw someone asked a question on Twitter, and I asked, I mean, X, oh, no.
I was thinking,
And then
should
you
I
were,
should I call out and say X, or is it gonna be one of those like funny the first time, not funny the fifth time?
if we change it and we all call it X now, I still gonna be called Twitter at some point. It's
Yeah,
an alias at this point.
yeah, it
But
is.
anyway, so the guy asked this question about um software developers, like what do you do when you have like so much to do, like a lot of tasks, and you get overwhelmed? And I remember I had answered the question, but just lightly, I was saying that what I usually do was just like watch like random videos and just pretend like I don't have a lot to do and just like watch random soccer videos for a while, until I get my, my calm and my focus back. So,
Yeah,
but I was curious,
yeah.
I wanted to ask you the same question. What do you do when you have so much to do and you get overwhelmed? Do you
Yes.
even get overwhelmed? First
Oh,
question.
yeah. Oh, definitely. There's actually a very good four-step plan that you can implement in this situation. It's guaranteed to help. Uh, Lie on the floor, curl into a ball, try not to cry, cry a lot. But
Absolutely,
all joking aside, I think definitely everybody kind of gets to that point where the onslaught just becomes unbearable. And yeah, in terms of what to do, yeah, it's a good question. I think like organizing time is hard, and brain starts playing tricks on you where you start ignoring the big ticket items and prioritizing something trivial to kind of give you this illusion of moving forward, even though you're like what you should be doing, but you're not doing it type stuff. And certainly, I think I tend to procrastinate more during those times because sometimes the whole idea of like having to go back into this massive task that's ahead of you feels so overwhelming that it's like, well, I'm just gonna watch another video for next 15 minutes and then I'll start working on the thing I'm supposed to be working on. So I definitely been in that situation. And I think I'm starting to have a suspicion that potentially burnout actually, like that's sort of the like the birthplace of burnout is that evasion that doesn't really evade anything. It's just like masking the problem. But the more you're in that loop, the more stressed out you get. And that's where, like that burnout meter starts to slowly accumulate. Um, I guess the best way of solving it is not getting there in the first place, but that's not always an option. Sometimes the external circumstances just don't allow for it. And yeah, I think it's a um, really big problem. And ideally, I would say, well, put clear constraints on your time and, just punt everything that doesn't fit until tomorrow. And sometimes, it's just um, maybe you'll manage to kind of sort it out and work a little bit extra and sort and get through to the bottom of that particular pile, which I guess is fair. Sometimes you have to have like a little burst of activity to get over something particularly worrisome. Maybe you have to work overtime for a couple of days or a couple of weeks. I think that it turns into a big problem when it turns into like what's affectionately called the death march. It's when it's not a week or a month, but
Yeah.
it's like
Hmm.
6 months and then 12 months and then 18 months and then third year, and everybody's just like doing this crazy rhythm. I hear that uh, it's a very big problem in places like game dev, for instance, because they have pretty strict deadlines,
Hmm.
and it's just like all stops are pulled for extended periods of time, and everybody's like sleeping under their desks, and we still get crappy crappy releases on day one. So I don't know if it's like helping or not, right? But
Hmm.
it's just, and yeah, if you find yourself like in a death march, the sooner you realize that, the better, because the sooner you can bail out of that situation, the better. Because it's likely, if you continue with it, at the end of the day, what you're gonna have to show for it, it's like, hey, I destroyed my well-being for 2 years, and we delivered some button in some application or something. Like, is the outcome going to be proportionate to the amount of effort put in? So you kind of have to understand what it is that you expect to have on the other side. Um, but I guess more in a more practical terms, what do you do? It's like how to organize it, especially if you clear out 3 tasks and then 5 more fall into your lap the same day, and that happens every day, and it just keeps on growing and growing and growing. And yeah, I think if that keeps happening, then it's probably. I was just thinking that you probably have to understand the situation. Is it like, what's the source of those? Because if you're part of a bigger organization and they just keep doing that, maybe it warrants a conversation with your higher ups and be like, what's up with that? Like, we can't keep up with this. It's not feasible. But if you're an entrepreneur and it's just your business and these are the things that you need to do, it's a completely different situation, right? Because then it becomes a prioritization game where everything's important and you can't necessarily sacrifice things, but maybe you start need to sacrifice things and saying no to more things. Because I think in that situation you may think that everything's important, but probably it isn't. Probably there's like one thing or two things that are really, really important, and everything else is nice to have. And it's it's understanding what is feasible to have on a chopping block and what is not, and then just get rid of all of the things that are getting you to your goal.
Yeah, I'm gonna play devil's advocate a little bit, and I would suggest like, what about increasing your Adderall dosage?
It's not
No.
free. Okay, so when I was joking in the beginning about self-medication, like this is probably the class
Hmm.
of medication that I had in mind, which I have not tried them myself. So I don't know. I had this occasional thought of like, maybe now is the time. But somehow I managed throughout my entire professional career without having to resort to those. And you know, it's probably a good idea to continue on that same path. So I don't know the
Absolutely.
effects of it personally. I can only speculate based on like the pop culture and anecdotal evidence from some of my
Mm-hmm.
friends. But it's still not free, right? Like it's again, you're gonna be paying for it later, so you can't be in that state perpetually. Like so one friend of mine, he says that he's like basically uh using them like during like he's learning, he's studying for this stuff, and he's basically saying he's like, oh, when I need to study for it, like he works some full-time job outside of it, and he like studies on weekends, so he just does it on a weekend to study and then not do it any other time, which is better, I guess, than doing it all the time. But even then,
Yeah.
it's I don't know. I feel like it is, I mean, it is performance enhancing drugs, but they do have the cost.
Yeah.
And I don't necessarily
Yeah.
know what the cost is or how it manifests in the long run. So I don't know. I would not advise and disavow, disavow. Kids, don't do drugs.
Yeah. Same here. I don't think I want to. I don't think I would advise to say that because I know. I don't think anything is. I mean, there is already vices that you probably already like get into. Adding Adderall to this just like complicates everything, and you never know what kind of effect it has to have and the body at the end of the day. Maybe like 10 years from now, or like if you continue long period of time. I don't know. Maybe it works. Maybe I don't know. Anyway, I was just gonna check with you if you were
Yeah.
going to endorse Adderall or
I
not.
imagine I imagine that it works, but with these things, I think that there are far more benign things that we have problems moderating once we get used to them. And that's not a benign thing. So, if you have problems moderating your ice cream intake, Adderall is probably not for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But anyway, so to continue, yeah, I also continue like watching some other people's tweets and like how they continue to respond to this question. And some people kind of like were insinuating coding is, coding is fun. You you code every day. Sometimes I'm starting to feel like people who really say things like this in social media, I don't think they do this thing for a living. It sounds like these are people who do it like on Saturday morning for 2 hours and then, you know, at that point it's probably fun, but maybe I'm speaking for myself. I mean, it's fun if it's like on a good day, but is this something that you will do on a Sunday afternoon just because you have nothing else to do? Or or this is something you would there are some people, right? For example, and there are some people who find coding or like writing codes or like building something to be something they do even in their leisure hours, like leisure time. But for some of us, we do it for a purpose. I want to do this. It's not because I have nothing else to do. It's because I want to do this. That's why I would sit there for hours to figure it out. But somehow you see some people like the influencers on X say, "Oh, coding is beautiful." Like they preach it so someone like it's as good as like you're enjoying pasta or something or whatever. I don't know if you feel the same way. Do you also find it to be like this, or you're at the point where you're like, well, I only do it for work and that's it?
Even if you enjoy pasta, you're not going to be able to eat pasta for 14 hours a day every day, right? And
Exactly.
okay, so here's the thing. I used to be like that. Um, Not in terms of posting banal inspirational quotes on Twitter, but in terms of actually spending all of my waking hours behind a computer, not necessarily always writing code, but doing related things, managing my servers, trying to, get something going on my server, some software or tending to my email server or the web server or what have you, or like trying out all sorts of different things. And
Mhm.
I still do that. However, I think when people say coding is fun, I would concede to them the point that when you're learning in the very beginning, it is a lot of fun. But after you reach a certain level where the magnitude and the scope of the problem is not building a to-do app or a movie database, that usually all of the boot camps tends to choose for their apps of choice,
Mhm.
where
Mhm.
everything's kind of pre-determined and delineated, and you know exactly what needs to be done and how to do it and what functions and abstractions to use. You're just building it out of a tiny. It's like the difference maybe turns into, when you buy a Lego kit and you have the
On IKEA.
instructions with all the step by steps, or IKEA, and
Mhm.
then later on, you're not building the thing, but you're designing the manual of how to put other things together. And that is way more complicated, and you have to think about it way more, and it requires a different kind of demand of your cognitive faculties. And while it could be fun, there's way more frustration and uncertainty, and the stakes are higher too. Like if you make mistakes in your schoolwork to do app, it's one thing, but if you screw up the architecture for some enterprise application that's supposed to be serving hundreds of thousands of people, it's a little bit different, let's say. So, the level of responsibility and the fear of failure and all of that, I think it layers on top. Because I remember spending hours and hours and hours. I would come back from school and I would get on my computer and I would connect to my server and open the editor and just start, playing around with different things. Because the stakes were, it was just me having fun and learning stuff. Nothing really dependent on those things. I mean, sometimes stuff depended on those things. Like, I don't know, I was hosting a photo gallery for my family so that,
Mm.
my dad, who
That's it.
takes a lot of pictures, wants
Oof.
to upload pictures. So whenever that thing doesn't work, I start getting calls and he's like, "Hey, how come this thing doesn't work?" And I'm like, "Well, it's on best effort basis. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work." And
Fair
so,
enough.
or the one time where there was a power loss at my place and I was still hosting my server at my home, and it was like some old second-hand hand-me-down machine, and the hard drives failed catastrophically, and like I nearly lost all of my data, including like all of my emails. So it was a lot of fun trying to sort that out because the stakes were slightly higher then. But
Mm.
yeah, once you start doing it professionally, um, it's on a different level. I think if you're like junior to early intermediate, it can still be a lot of fun because you're learning. Like learning new things is exciting. But at this level, you're probably not learning new things where you kind of get this immediate response from what you're doing. Because once you've seen one reactive web framework, you've seen them all, and sometimes occasionally something surprises you pleasantly, like, oh, that's kind of cool. But you don't really have time necessarily to play with these things like on low level, so you kind of get to appreciate them a little bit from the distance. Because if you get a chance to drag that into your project, maybe you get to play around with it, and that would be your excuse. It's like, oh, I really maybe want to try HTMX, by the way, and maybe if you manage to get it in somewhere and kind of play around, that would be your time where you get to actually try those types of things. Because normally in your day to day, it's like, hey, the stack in our company is determined. We're building using these tools. So, you know, go ahead and implement the features that you need. So it just becomes very mundane and in some ways boring too. Like, and the thing is, in professional world, you don't want too much excitement. Too much excitement means something's on fire or something horrible is happening and everybody's running around screaming. And that's very exciting, but that's not normally what you want. You kind of want boring and predictable, so nothing really interferes
Yeah,
with your
fair enough.
business and uptimes and SLAs and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, yeah. This is how I think as well because I think even compared to other things, so like let's say like I enjoy playing soccer, but there was a time where I was playing in a league and I had to play like twice in a week or and still go to training. At some point, the fun actually stopped. Now it
Yeah,
felt like work, you know? And I think this is probably the same thing with if you do it professionally.
yeah,
In the beginning, when you're learning, maybe you are able to center a div for the first time. Or maybe you get the marquee HTML thing, the one that goes across the screen, and it's just like so cool, like
yeah. It's like, ooh,
But
look at what I can do.
yeah, yeah, exactly. So maybe at some point when the stakes gets really high, and then there is extra pressure, and people actually waiting on you to figure it out, then I guess at that point it's more like the adrenaline that you probably enjoy more because I think at some point we have to enjoy it, right? Maybe some people who enjoy adrenaline, like the pressure, like the feeling
Yeah,
of something going on,
yeah.
will
I think
probably
I,
have
I
more
I
fun.
think the other thing too is that in the beginning, that sort of loop, that little dopamine endorphin loop is really tight. Oh, I just learned how to put a button on a page, and when I click on a button, things happen. Maybe it
Mhm.
took you like 20 minutes to code it, and you got that hit right away. But now it's like, oh, I'm building an architecture for a project that might not fully materialize for a year. So, that that dopamine hit is like way on the horizon out there, and I'm waiting for it. And like, and in terms of very trivial stuff, we keep bringing it to this realm of mind enhancing chemicals, but like it doesn't hit the same after all these years. Like having implementing these trivial features, it's just like okay, yeah, okay, like we got this, we got that, but there isn't like that same sort of stimulus that would give you that much excitement as it is when you kind of do it for the first time, right? And that's why
Yeah,
it's different. And there's this joke that I think is applicable to so many different situations. And, I don't know, but it goes kind of like this where, like a guy dies and he's, standing there and basically he's being asked, it's like, okay, where do you want to go? Do you want to go to hell or do you want to go to heaven? And you
oh,
can you can
good
take a
question.
quick tour, right? And you can see for yourself. And so like he goes to
Mm.
heaven and it's just like all these angels floating around singing hymns, and it's kind of all very kind of prim and proper. And then he goes to hell and it's like a bar and a casino and a striptease, and everyone's gambling and drinking, and it's like all this crazy good time. He's like, well, damn, I pick hell. Obviously it's way more fun out here than it is over there. And they're like, okay,
Yeah.
stamp his soul's passport, whatever. And the first thing, he just got thrown into a giant vat of boiling oil, and somebody starts stabbing him with a pitchfork. And the guy's like, well, what about all of the gambling and alcohol and scantily clad women? And the guy says, well, do not mistake tourism for immigration.
Ooh.
So, my
Oh,
friends, do not mistake
oh.
tourism for immigration. There are two different
You know
things.
what? This is a very good analogy. This is exactly what it is because I mean, yeah, I mean, it's not like hell, but
No, I
if you
mean, I
follow,
wasn't trying to make that. It's just that's how the joke goes. But the key point is that just because you
Mhm,
observed a portion of it and you've
mhm.
seen sort of the good parts, that doesn't necessarily mean that that's like that all the time too.
Yeah, it's a really good analogy because judging from the things that I noticed in my timeline this week, I feel a lot of people probably are thinking or like are feeling the push to get into these things just because someone said it's easy. You don't even need a degree to do it, and then they show you like all the fancy HTML stuff that they do, and it's so colorful, and you just feel. I mean, if it motivates you, it's good. If this thing gets you to want to do it, I think it's good, but yeah, like you said, tourism is not immigration. So enjoy it all, and if you decide to immigrate, then
Yeah, you have to
fantastic.
do a little bit more research if you choose to move
Yeah,
in there permanently. I mean, okay, not
yeah,
to dissuade people from doing it. It obviously still can be a lot of fun and very fulfilling.
yeah,
It's
absolutely.
just that there should be the expectation that it's not always like that. There's plenty of frustration to go around. And, I think at all levels, you need to sort of balance the frustration with the excitement to kind of stay
Yeah,
stay a little bit in a plus side on the excitement part, because if it's in the plus side on a frustration part, you'll eventually burn out and quit. So you kind of have to
yeah,
keep yourself motivated. But
yeah.
something also goes for the desire to spend your waking hours doing this stuff. I think you just have a better competitive advantage compared to the people who don't, because you just learn more in the same amount
Mhm.
of time, roughly.
Yeah. I speak this way, but I think I might be one of those people who spend a lot of time um, doing these, not the 14 hours work days, doing something related. Even now, like after work, I started this. I started contributing to the open source project,
Oh,
which
nice, nice,
yeah,
awesome.
yeah. So like I was doing like the setup and all the beginning stuff recently, and then it was cool. But this is like I used to do this type of things before, but I just never really had time for it. But I started doing it now, and then I was thinking in the moment to ask you, like, how do you have you ever considered contributing to open source, or like even if you would do it, how would you go about it? Because one of the challenge that I actually have with this is that sometimes some of these projects don't have like updated README docs. Like you don't really have good enough information. It depends on the project too. If it's like really big ones or like medium sizes, maybe they might have. But the ones where you can afford to make mistakes and not get shot in the head, don't don't really like. I mean, don't most of the time have like prioritized readmes. So I'm curious if you've had this type of challenge, or if you've ever thought about doing something like this.
Yeah, I did a little bit of that, mostly with documentation, actually. I think it's the one of the lowest hanging fruits there are, is
Yeah,
documentation. Yeah. Well, I mean, contributing to actual source code is way more difficult because you actually need to
yeah,
understand like the local
yeah,
dialect and the style, and
yeah,
actually
exactly.
understand what they're trying to do, which you kind of need to immerse yourself for a
Yeah,
while into this project. And so for most part, again, I believe I might have mentioned it before, but my contributions were limited to effectively either fixing a bug that's like affecting me particularly, or fixing documentation where it's unclear or something like that. So I haven't really tried to go for something very serious in terms of open source contributions. These are mostly been like drive-by style, just like, oh, I can if I can take 5 minutes to submit an MR
Mhm,
or a
mhm,
bug report. I do submit bug reports, and whenever I submit bug reports, I try to go um, above and beyond in terms of like reproducibility of it. So it's not just, oh, this thing doesn't work, but it's actually, okay, if you do this and this and this under these circumstances, then it doesn't work.
yeah,
So at least people have a chance to figure it out. And sometimes, again, even if I feel like I have the solution for it, I might describe it textually in terms of like, here's what I think could be the cause of it. But I usually don't try to fix it because I don't necessarily understand how that fix might affect other things. And, you know, if somebody's familiar with that area, kind of pointing their attention to it with steps and ideas that they might do they might do it in a way that overall fits into the grand scheme of things in that project, whereas I don't necessarily have time to kind of fully immerse myself in that.
Yeah, I mean, you do the important parts then. Like, I mean, if you get to do all of that, I think that's probably more helpful than sometimes, when you have tried to solve a problem and maybe it doesn't even get merged or it doesn't get accepted, these kind
Hmm.
of things. It can happen.
Yeah.
But one thing I noticed, I was talking about the README, right? But I use this platform. It's called Code Triage. I don't know if anybody wants to check that out. Um, they kind of like
Plug it. We'll put the link in the description.
maybe we can do that. I mean, if it helps anyone, it's called Code Triage, and they kind of like have the list of the different projects, and like you can select any one of them, and then every week or 2 weeks, depending on how many often you want to contribute, they send you like some tasks, so you can have something, but and 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 this kind of like helps, to remove the stress of like thinking about what to do or just like navigating through the entire like application and not even knowing where to go. And also they have like Discord channels for some of these things. So it helps. These are just things that I noticed like now that I'm trying to do something like this again. And I find it very interesting. And I was just wondering, like, if I spend all these hours during the day doing something exactly similar, and then you spend your free time that you're probably supposed to use to watch movies and enjoy yourself to do this kind of things. And I was just wondering, like, does it stop? Like, what do you do like with your free time
Okay,
that's code
so
related?
yeah, fair enough. I think that has changed. I think that, there is enjoyment to be had from that type of activity. And so if you do
Mhm.
enjoy it, I don't feel like there's anything necessarily wrong with that. But, as long as you don't neglect other aspects of your life. And I notice, for instance, like I've read way fewer amount of books um, this year compared to last year for some reason. Well, I probably even know what the reason is, but I don't know. There's this website called Goodreads, which is like a book tracker, and every
Mhm.
year they have this reading challenge. And for the last couple of years, I set myself up for was it like 24 books or 32 books in a year. And I know I kind of had to cheat a little bit and read something short to kind of qualify for just the thing to get it to the finish line. But still,
Ooh, okay.
I did still read quite
Mhm.
a considerable amount of books. And then this year I haven't gotten all the way up there. And there's only 1 month left, and I don't think that I will have the time unless I start again packing it with something irrelevant, which I don't want to do. And there's definitely other forms of sort of, you know, highly processed, calorie dense forms of entertainment, you know, like the fast food of entertainment that doesn't require that much effort, which is,
YouTube.
YouTube, yeah, uh, YouTube and
Mm-hmm.
all the other um, media of that nature, where you just kind of want to turn off your brain and just kind of, zone out for a while, which again, I understand that that's not the best use of my time. And maybe reading a book could be a little bit nicer and help me to kind of calm down and disconnect. And I should be doing that more. Or playing video games, but at the same time, I do enjoy playing video games. It's like, what can I say? Video games have been part of my life since I was very, very young.
Yeah.
And sure, sometimes they take a lot of time, and a lot of people would say, "Oh, there's no tangible result." I've actually remembered this recently. I don't remember if I told you, but I've discovered this website. Do you know the game Roblox?
No.
No. Okay. Well, fair enough. I think it's popular. It's popular with younger
Mhm.
kids, but it's kind of like it's it's kind of a sandbox because people can build gaming experiences within Roblox and they're accessible through that platform. So it's almost kind of like a game building engine, kind of like
Mhm.
Gmod, but on steroids, and that's just by
All
design.
right.
Yeah, you know Gmod.
I don't know this then. To be honest, like maybe I'm not that big on gaming. I
Okay,
just play like the basic ones, like FIFA
yeah,
once in a while. But it would be nice to get into it. But you're right. Like doing something else like this, it helps the brain a lot. Just doing something different.
yeah.
But for me, the reason why I consider things like this is because it's the way I learn. I think it's probably because of the way I learn. I like to learn.
Hmm.
Um, which brings me to another question, right? So, like,
Right.
when I want to learn something new, or maybe a new stack, or like something new generally, I find that consuming tutorials don't really help me much. Like, I could watch like videos, and maybe this is not even good for Udemy, but sometimes I watch all these like videos on Udemy, and then you find like at the end of the day, the things you learn, you probably forget about the things that you learned before actually like using them.
Hmm.
And
Yeah,
then
I think that's very true. You have to be using it yourself in
yeah,
order to
exactly. So
actually do it. Um, yeah, well, I guess so. The point that I was trying to make before is like, anyway, there's this game Roblox, and somebody made a copy of Ryanair airline in Roblox, which is there's this airline which is a real
mhm,
thing, and that airline is somebody made a copy of that airline in Roblox where they have like basically like operations and planes, and people can board the planes and fly, and there's pilots, and it's all within Roblox, and they have a very professionally done website which is basically like the actual website, but it's within that game. And some might even say like, well, what's the point of that, because it's completely fake, like there's nothing to it. But I don't know, I find that it's pretty cool, um because sorry, hold on. Anyway, where were we? Yeah, I was talking about this fake real airline, which in the end it's like, what what's the difference? What difference is it gonna make? Because it's all within that game. But I don't know, I feel it's just pretty cool, and people are like learning something new, and somebody had to make all of that. Somebody had to make that website, so they learned a
mhm.
lot of stuff there. Somebody had to do this whole thing with you know uh learning how to like do airport operations within a game. And of course it's not even remotely close to the real thing, but you know I feel like a lot of people are having a lot of fun doing it. So who's to say that it's all completely useless? Sure, it can get pretty crazy, you know, and become a little bit weird. Uh, but so far, people are having fun.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean, I don't really know this stuff, but I imagine maybe the people can learn this in different ways. So, for example, is it like a coding game, or like you play games to learn something?
I think people just build games and then other people play those games. So I remember during when the whatchamacallit, the Squid Game, that show Squid Game.
Yeah,
There's like a billion different Squid Game like experiences built within Roblox, like with that doll that would tell you to stop and go and things like that. So people just build these little mini games that other people can just join and play. So if you don't know how to make games, you can just play other people's games, and if you do, you can kind of make
Fair
your
enough.
own. So it's
Fair
very
enough.
creative. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess it's probably like similar to what I was saying. Like for me, I want to, instead of spending times watching like videos or like reading a lot of books before you actually start using the stuff you learn, I find like being able to find a project that you can just get into to use as a learning tool that can be helpful. So and I know like not everybody wants to start from like building to do apps or like building the next what was that stuff you give a few examples,
Oh,
training services.
movie database. Yeah.
Yeah, so maybe if you find a fairly organized repo work with, I think maybe it's a good thing. So this is what I'm trying now. Like I find I probably will I learn more with this, and hence why I was doing it. So I was just curious, like if this was a common thing, like or this is something that is a bit more complicated to really recommend. How do you feel about this kind of learning?
How do I feel about that kind of learning?
Some people prefer to learn
Yes, yes.
everything first. So somebody asked me a question the other day, like, um, would you prefer to learn everything about JavaScript before learning um tools like React and Angular, whatever?
There's this ongoing joke that it's like you learned React before you learned JavaScript, which is kind of funny because it's true, right? There are people who learned React without really learning JavaScript because you can
Yeah,
kind of do that these days. The problem
yeah,
is I think
absolutely.
it's still JavaScript's a very quirky language, so doing that would set you up for all kinds of gotchas that are very not obvious. I think that I believe that we had that conversation before, and I think that my answer was in the whole spirit of like the 80-20 Pareto principle, that 20% of effort will get you 80% of the result. If you can get to that 80% of the result with 20% of effort before you switch to something else, that's probably good enough. Because, getting it to a 99% is a very, very difficult task. It's going to take a long time, but not getting it to something reasonable too is kind of a waste of time, because if you just start hopping between the things, I know it like there's lots of different things that can be very exciting, and you want to try this and you want to try that, and maybe parts of it is, again, because with novelty you get that you get that reinforcement much quicker. But as soon as you learn more of it, you start kind of hitting different problems that take longer, so there's not that immediate kind of hit when you solve
Mm.
them. You might not see that for a while. And so people are like, well, if I switch frameworks, I get to experience that again, because it's brand new, and I'm going to have that enjoyment of doing it. But I don't know if that's a viable strategy, because professionally you still need to be able to actually use something and not just try new things all the time.
I'm not sure. I'm not so maybe just like sticking to something. Is that what you're trying to say?
Stick with it till you get it up to, like, I don't know, the minimum amount of effort you can spend to get to a reasonable level of proficiency. So don't like spend 5 years learning something to some very, very in-depth level. Spend, I don't know, 6 months doing the same thing and just get it to a very good enough level, and then, switch to something else.
Yeah, see, so this is what I was trying to say earlier. Like, if you spend 6 months, let's say hypothetically, you're learning JavaScript, and if you spend 6 months learning JavaScript before you actually start building stuff, I find that not a lot of people can actually stay dedicated to a course to learning one thing for this long period of time. So I find that even if you do, at the end of the 6 months, those things that you learned in the first 2 months, you probably don't even remember as much. But hopefully, it's a build up on the things you're currently learning in the 6 months. So I'm not too sure if this kind of I don't know. Maybe it works for some people. I think maybe my brother is like this, but maybe it works for some people. Like they spend a lot of time to do one thing first, then they move to the next, to the next. But for me, I find that I would rather get into the water and try to swim.
Yeah. I guess it
And
depends on your goal. And I didn't mean necessarily that you read books for 6 months without touching a single line of code. That's not what I mean, right? It's that you,
okay,
in the course of making things, you dedicate time to learning it. Because again, necessity is, the necessity is mother of all invention, but like it's also a very good teacher because reading some tutorial on something abstract that you might never use, I guess it can maybe give you an appreciation for some possibility, and so that if you ever get to that point, at least you know it's possible. But if you're never gonna get to actually using it, I don't know, was that waste of time? Maybe not a complete waste of time, but like I learned most of the things that I know because I was trying to build something and I've encountered difficulties and I had to figure it out and sort it out, right?
yeah.
And it was all through the process of building something and, stepping on that rake and getting hit in the head a whole bunch of times. And
Yeah.
yeah, and that happens with everything. I think it's just eventually because there's more similarities in this profession between things that there are differences in the grand scheme of things. Once you have some sort of basal foundational level of things, new things become familiar because there isn't anything really that new. A lot of it is more of a rhyme or a remix on something that's been around before, right? And so you're like, it's like I've seen that before. It's not exactly like it,
Mm-hmm.
but it's very close. So you
Mm-hmm.
you don't
Yeah.
necessarily even have to learn it. It's more of a learning the quirks and peculiarities of it. But I don't know. Like for instance, if I wanted to learn something completely new, I don't know. Maybe for me that would be formal proofs or TLA plus or something along those lines where it's just so completely removed from my day-to-day tasks. But like learning C sharp after you've learned Java, it's kind of very similar, right? You're not really learning like there's
Yeah.
there's quirks and there's
Yeah. True.
peculiarities, but fundamentally they're very, very similar, right? And on that
Yeah.
level,
True.
again, there's more similarities than there are differences. A database is a database is a database, and a reactive rendering framework is basically, they're all on some level very similar conceptually, right? And the three-tiered architecture and hexagonal architecture, or like all of those things, it's just a remix of previous parts. And I'm not saying like it's a bad thing. It's just like if you have breadth of knowledge wide enough, a lot of those things are going to be familiar. Like you switch to a new thing, and it's like it's not entirely new. I broadly understand the principle, so it becomes easier. But because it becomes easier, it's also not as exciting because again, there's not much of that novelty factor, or the layer, the veneer of novelty is really thin, so that tends to wear off pretty quickly.
Yeah. But I have a question, another question for you, right? So I know that you've worked with different languages and different tools, but if you have to pick one right now, um, that will be your go-to, let's say the heavens are falling, and you have to pick one language. What is, which one would you pick?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, the one that I use most in my professional day to day, it's the JavaScript TypeScript combination. I prefer it
Okay.
to most things, even though, there's a lot of things that I'm not happy with in that entire ecosystem. For me to just start something to get it to some very trivial shape where it does stuff takes very little time. Um,
So,
like back in the day, I started with PHP,
mhm.
and
Yeah,
I
I
could
remember
I
that.
could get something off the ground really quickly with PHP. With .NET, it was considerably more difficult to just have something really quickly. I think now maybe with .NET Core, it's kind of back to that state. With Java,
Do
I
we
wouldn't
even
even
still
know where
have
to
.NET
begin.
Core?
Sorry, say again?
I'm not even. Do we still have .NET Core, or it's just .NET
I
now?
think they renamed .NET, which tells you that I haven't really been around it in a while. When I stopped doing .NET
Yeah,
projects was when it still was .NET Core, but I think they did rebrand it back to just .NET. Um,
yeah.
but yeah, I don't even know why I qualified it with core versus not core. But I think so before the whole core concept was developed, if you wanted to do .NET, you needed to be like fully embedded in a Microsoft ecosystem. Like you needed a Visual Studio, you needed a Windows Server. I think with the advent of Core, you no longer need all of those things. You can just say, "Oh, I have my terminal and I have my editor, and I can run it on Linux or I can run it on Mac." So it became way easier. Whereas before,
Yeah,
if you don't have your MSDN subscription, you're basically out of luck trying to develop in .NET.
yeah, yeah. It was really tough thing. But anyway, so the reason why I asked you this question about your favorite is because I was curious. Like I know, like even now you've done like many years working with this language, but I'm wondering, like, if you get to start from the beginning right now, how would you teach yourself to 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 learn this language? I mean, how would you learn this language if you get to start from the beginning now? I think it's been like what? How many years have you been using JavaScript?
20-ish,
20.
probably.
Yeah, so
Well, maybe not 20-ish, but like so 2003. So JavaScript probably what 18. Let's say 18. Because I think PHP server-side programming, like before, when I started using JavaScript, it barely had anything. And I remember that you can, when divs first came about, you could use JavaScript to animate divs and like move them on screen, and that was like something mind-blowing. But nobody was really taking it seriously back then. I think JavaScript only started to get more popular
mm,
after Google, probably Gmail and Google Maps, that kind of showed
right?
people what was possible to do with it. Because before people didn't really appreciate it for what it was, and the whole, I guess, Web 2.0, that whole movement, the reflections and the drop shadows and rounded corners and spinning barber poles, that whole aesthetic is also when JavaScript started making more serious strides in programming, and before Node even. So it was still purely client side. Uh, so it's been a long time, and it has changed quite dramatically since then. So it is a different language now than it was 18 years ago. I mean, conceptually, it's still the same. It just become more nice, more usable, and more in line with other languages syntactically. However, all that is a dirty trick, and all of the nasty things that are part of classic JavaScript are still in there, and people still occasionally trip over that without even understanding. So it's not a it masquerades really well. Like it pretends to be object oriented because it has the class keyword, but it's not, And so a lot of people don't
Yeah,
understand that part. And like it can be kind of a functional language because you have functions as first class citizens, but like it's no Haskell certainly, but you can do a lot of things that you can do in functional languages. So it's a bit of a chimera in a sense. It pretends to be other things. And if I were to start it right now, I think right now it's much easier to start learning it right now. Not even because of all the materials online and all that kind of stuff, but mostly, and I believe I said it before as well, it's just right now, if you want to start learning programming today, you only need to press one button on your computer and you can start learning programming. And that magical button is F12 in your browser that opens up the console with all of the development tools. That wasn't a thing, that only became a thing. I don't know when did Firebug came out the first, which was it was kind of interesting. So Firebug originally was a bookmarklet extension for Firefox, and you could go on a page and press a bookmark, and the bookmark had within a JavaScript code that would like bootstrap like the console and the element inspector within the web page you were browsing. And that was just like, wow. Because before, debugging JavaScript in the browser was massively pain in the ass. Like it was basically not even a thing. I think IE tried to do something, but again, you needed Visual Studio, and it only worked for like Visual Basic Script and JavaScript maybe. So it was like a non-starter. And then I believe Firefox embedded it as an extension into their browser. And I don't know if they assumed all of the people working on Firebug extension, and they started working for Mozilla, but they were the first. I think people don't understand it now, but Chrome had it after Firefox did. And IE, when it was still running on, before it was switched to Chromium, when it was still running on Trident, like IE 8 and stuff like that, they added dev tools to their browser as well. And they were, in the very first couple of versions, they were way crappier than everything else. They were like painful to work with, but at least they had them too. And so, now every browser pretty much has it. And that's why if you want to learn programming today, you just press F12 and you go to console, and off you go to the races. You have your language interpreter. It's very similar. When I was a kid, I started with a Sinclair Spectrum computer, and you boot it up, you turn it on. You don't even have to boot it up technically. You just turn it on, and immediately you get the prompt for basic language created by Microsoft, actually, which is funny enough. And you have to start inputting code if you want to do anything, even to play the games. You actually have to run the commands to load the game in memory and run it. So it wasn't like double clicking on anything. That wasn't even a thing, right? You actually had to write some 2 lines of code, load, which would start the tape, and then after it finished loading, you would say run, and it would actually run. So that's kind of how it started for me. So, and in a sense, it can be as easy as that too. You just turn it on and press F12.
I mean, I hope like the Twitter influencers don't hear this because now you're just gonna make their work easier. They're just gonna tell everyone like, oh, to learn programming, you just need the F12, one button. But I don't know if it's actually that easy, But maybe like I said earlier, like we all learn differently. It's just pretty interesting how you
You
would
see, I
you
think,
would do it.
yeah, I think it all comes down to necessity, because when I was a kid, there was no quick entertainment, period. All entertainment was, you have to entertain yourself,
Mhm.
and it was very difficult. I mean, difficult in the sense that it required effort. Right now, so back then, you turn on a computer and you get greeted by a black screen with the DOS prompt with like the cursor blinking. It would say like A
Mhm.
colon greater than for
Mhm.
disk A because you booted off a floppy disk. And if you want to have fun using that, you had to actually figure out how to do it. There was a process, and if you were bored and you wanted to entertain yourself, you had to. Now, if you're bored, there's billions of ways of entertaining yourself trivially without even having to think twice. And so there is no impetus. for kids to go into those things and learn how they are done, because all of that has been solved. Computers are easy now. There used to be really hard. Like, as I said, my first computer booted off cassette tapes. The other computer booted off floppy disks. And, I remember my dad going to a conference somewhere in Germany and coming back and telling us that he saw this thing called Windows 3.1 and how mind-blowingly amazing it was, like nothing he's ever seen in his entire life. Because we were still using DOS back then, basically. It's like Norton Commander. The classic thing, you turn on the computer, it boots into Norton Commander, you see those two blue panes side by side where you get to like floppy disk A and floppy disk B, for two disk drives that you have in your machine, and maybe second one has some games on it, and you can run them. And then Windows 3.1 was something just so out of this world, where you have a mouse and you click on things and it's in color and it's just amazing, right? But now none of it. There's no obstacles in your path if you want to be entertained using modern technology. And so there's no impetus to learn anything, because why would you? It's just you just click on a YouTube icon and it starts playing funny things to entertain you. You
So
know,
that means you probably one of those people who found this type of things as entertainment, like
I think so. I think I had an affinity for technology since early age. I could understand operations of various appliances like TVs and VCRs and things like that with ease. So now, when people say, oh, like a monkey can use an iPad, and they do, in fact, and they actually learn how to use an iPad really fast, like
yeah,
scrolling through pictures and swiping left and right and all that. And that's more of a testament to the designers at Apple, because they made it that trivial. But it was not trivial. And yeah, if you wanted entertainment, you had to work for it. I think that's also one of the reasons why it's practically impossible to get kids to read anything these days. It's because
yeah.
there's way more easier ways to get entertained. When I was hit with pneumonia and I had to spend 3 months at home without being able to go to school or see my friends or play with my friends outside, and it was middle of the winter and there was nothing, I read all of the books that were available to me that I could understand. And then it was just infinite boredom. So when I was finally allowed to go to ambulatory clinic for some recovery procedures, they had a public
Interesting.
library on the way, and it was just
Wow.
godsend. Like, oh my God, the library! I can get some new books to finally have
Wow.
something new to read. And if I had my computer with me then, I probably would have been even more dirty than I am right now. But I was living at my grandmother's, so that wasn't really an option.
I mean, maybe so. Like you said, then necessity. Um, you had nothing else to do, so it wasn't really entertainment. It wasn't like you had a choice. Anyway, maybe if because we always have choices now, so maybe the learning techniques might be different for
Yeah,
different people.
we're spoiled for
And
choice now. That's for sure.
yeah, yeah. Some people prefer different things. Some people would prefer not to use F12 because I don't even know. Like I think in F12 now, I don't know how much you can do. Maybe basic calculations. Can you really like and yeah, maybe you can create like some methods and yeah, yeah,
I think
possibly.
I mean, you can probably do as much as I could with basic on my Sinclair. At least it gives you something to poke around, which
Yeah,
is
true.
just zero friction. You don't need to
Yeah.
like everything that you need you already have. Like if you buy a new laptop today with Windows or Mac, doesn't matter. Well, maybe the shortcut might be different for on Mac. And I think in Safari you have to do some dancing around to enable the developer menu. So they clearly don't want you to know how it's done. They just want you to go to the App Store and buy, and
Yeah.
and they get their
Yeah.
30%. So why would they teach you how it's
Oh,
done, right?
yeah.
But on
30%.
on Windows, even if you have Edge, you that still works. You still get to your developer console and you can start poking
Yeah,
around without having to do literally anything else, which is very
yeah.
similar to how it was with Sinclair. You turn it on and you input code, very first thing you do.
I mean, yeah, I guess that would still give some dopamine. You still enjoy it that way, especially without having to set up anything. That's pretty cool.
Hmm.
Pretty cool.
Yeah, I
Anyway,
think I think it's different. I think it's different. The fact that um, again, all of it was brand new. I think computers are so mundane to kids right now. They just they always have been there. They've been born with them, with mobile phones, with tablets, with computers. There's nothing novel about it. It's just a fact of life.
yeah,
But 30 years ago, when I was getting into all of this, it was a new frontier, effectively. And I think maybe in North America that has happened sooner, but it hit like post-Soviet space quite later. And so when I
mm,
when I was 10 years old, it was still a frontier in a sense. So you could have a sense of adventure of being part of something completely brand new and exciting. And I mean, we
yeah,
didn't even have the internet for longest times, and kids now are born with it, right? So
yeah.
it's an entirely different situation. So in terms of learning it right now, I don't know. Uh, I wouldn't want to lose that romantic, in a way, uh, state that I was in when I was learning it. I feel like it was way more interesting now. Now I think it's a little bit more mundane and prosaic. It's just like I just need to learn programming to get a good job. But back then it was just like, ooh, I can talk to computers and they tell me something back.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
I think, I mean, I can't relate to 30 years ago, but at least I can relate to the part where, like, when it was still, you could still do a lot of, on the cool stuff. Like, my first interaction with, like, command prompts and all this kind of thing. Yeah, those were good times, when it was just in the beginning. I remember, like, when my brother was trying to show me how to calculate my age in seconds.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was fun times. Those were the times when you're like, you go out to say like, oh yeah, it's so fun. But at the time when you actually start doing it like professionally, like it's fun, but it's a different type of fun at that point. So
I think, you
it is
know
what
what?
it is.
I just had this thought, but um, I can kind of equate it back to, I guess, the advent of automobiles, because in the beginning, people were basically building their own automobiles because that was just so new that you could do it. But now you buy a car, do you have any idea of what to do with it if it breaks? It's like chock full of so many different parts. The average car probably has like
Mm,
25 different computers in it to operate all of the
mm-hmm.
things inside of it. And an average person doesn't just pop the hood and start fixing their car, right? It's a specialized knowledge. So
Yeah,
maybe our current frontier is maybe AI, and maybe now people like who learn to write prompts and train models, they're kind of in the same spot where it's just so brand new that it's super exciting. And then 10 years down the line, it's going to get that more complex and that more mundane that people would just kind of not give it a passing glance because it's just part of their life now, right? So
yeah,
if you're looking a train to jump onto that's slowly leaving the station, maybe there's this one because computers in general, that train has left the station a long time ago, and now you're I don't know. Hopefully, people will still see like a lot of magic about it and have some romantic notions, but not nearly as much as 30 years ago. That's for sure.
yeah. But now I'm curious here. Do you think the whole industry, like the part of machine learning and AI. Do you find that to be new, or do you find that it's just a certain products coming out of that industry is what makes it sound like it's new? Because I think it's been around for a while, but you think it's
I think
maybe,
that the idea, I think the idea for AI has certainly been there, probably even like before general computing and networking took off.
yeah,
I remember books that I had, books for electronics, like building circuits out of transistors, and at the very, very end, they had this section about how to build a perceptron, which is like a basic neural net thing that is able to like recognize some simple shapes using transistor logic. And it was very
yeah.
complicated for me at the time because I was a kid. But that book was published probably a couple of decades before I was born, and already like the building blocks and the mathematical apparatus that we're using right now, the foundations of it have been put way back, like probably in the 60s or something. It's just technologically we didn't have the capacity to achieve it. So that dream has been around way longer than anything else, and now it's kind of finally materializing. So, those guys. The thing is back then they thought that we're gonna have AGI in like the next 15 years, back in 60s, right? But it took
Me,
it took them like 60 years to get to uh, something approximating a mechanical Turk in a sense. And I don't know, maybe who knows? The whole conversation about singularity and the pace of change, hockey sticking so fast that we don't even know what's going to be on the other side. And maybe some advancements in uh, CPU design, miniaturization, or algorithms. Maybe we can have that in 5 years, and then our life will be entirely different. Who's to say? But again, we've been saying that we're going to have AGI for years and years and years and years and years, and finally we have something that is kind of closer, something feasible. Um, So maybe it's going to happen in 5 years. Maybe it'll take another 60. Maybe it'll never happen. Who the hell knows?
well, we'll see. We'll be there.
It's like for the longest time that train has been
Mhm.
standing in a station for 60 years, and only now it's slowly starting to pull out. So there's plenty of time to get on now. And now
Yeah, I
now
mean,
yeah, now you're going to be
we'll
called not a
see.
true fan. It's like you only like this team because they won the last game. But we're the hardcore fans. We like the team for the last 20 years when they were losing, you know?
And it's true, and it's been there, and it's actually quite a lot of interest. But I think the issue was that people were afraid of the the effect, like the type of effect it was going to have. I think maybe some people felt like, I remember many times people thought like building machines that like this, or like, or tools like this can replace people, or like do. Yeah, it's been a lot. But anyway, maybe another time when we actually like look into this a bit more in depth and actually go into the history, because I feel like there's been a lot of like interesting stories around it,
Yeah,
which might be worth
yeah.
discussing. But today, thank you so much, Vasili. Thank you for your time. It's really nice chatting with you as always. And see you again next week. No?
Yeah, we'll see you again next week. And, thank you for bringing up these topics. Uh, I think I was a little bit more distracted today than usual, so I promise I'll focus. And, you know, you got me to reminisce about the quote unquote good old days. So,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
That's like, I don't know, a hallmark of being old is when you look more toward your past than you do toward your future. So
Well,
I don't know how much it tells about me, but I don't know. I had
you've done
fun.
well.
Yeah. So
You've done well.
for all of us who are watching, thank you very much for being with us. I hope you enjoyed this, and leave a comment below if you found this subject to be interesting. Thank you and goodbye.